two different people raised from two different backgrounds. Most times they come from two different parts of the city or country. And now you're going to live under one roof and try to be one life. You're going to have some crazy moments. I mean, think about it. Some of us can't stand, to be in the same house with our siblings or parents or grandparents, let alone you keep waking up and it's the same person.
What's up, everybody? It's Willie and Alex from the Black Culture Podcast. I know you're ready to get into this video, but before you do that,
make sure to subscribe to our channel and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at the Black Culture Podcast.
Enjoy the video.
We have a very, very special guest, gentleman that's both a friend and a mentor to both me and my co-host. He is pastor of Rhema at the Warehouse. Also, he's an attorney, a magistrate, a personal bailiff, just an all-around fantastic individual. Very, very interesting guy. Really think you're going to love this interview. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the Black Culture Podcast, Anthony Parker.
Glad to be here. Glad to be part of this. This is great.
Thanks for being able to take the time out to speak with us. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Who would you say is Anthony Parker? Take us back to the beginning, before being a pastor, before being a bailiff, before being a attorney. Who would you say Anthony Parker is?
I'm Clara's boy. I'm Eddie's son, one of 7 children. I was the baby from 1972 to 1976 until Johnny came aboard at January 14th.
And just ruined everything for you.
He became, he became the baby. So, but the thing about it is he didn't become senior baby. He became like an associate, so we were like co-senior pastor babies.
Okay.
He was the baby, but I held on a little bit to the title. So I would just say that I was, really love my parents. Really love my parents. So like to hang around my dad and be grown around him. Like to follow my mom around. So I was just a kid off the Lee Harvard area. Went to Emile B. Soze. I love that because that school was directly across the street. And I like to come home for lunch so I could have my lunch home at noon, then walk back across the street. That was for kindergarten, first grade. And then the second grade, I was part of, that's when busing started. Busing started when I was in second grade. And we went over to the west side, and I came back to Emile for my 4th grade. I would say before become pastor and an attorney, I was just a Clara's son, Eddie's boy, always a preacher boy, always a little preacher who loves sports. So that's who I was, a little preacher boy who loves sports.
So what was it like growing up in a household? You said it was 7 of you guys?
7 of us. 7 children, so 9 total in the house.
I always think it's interesting because I was the only child. So I was the only child that wished I had siblings. Yeah. So what was that like?
Because I was second to the youngest, I would say that most of my vivid memories are when there were 8 in the family and then 7, because my oldest sister, she ended up going to school and moving out when I was still rather young. Growing up with a lot of brothers and sisters, it was just great to me. I mean, it was such normal life to me that anybody who didn't have a big family, I thought they were the minority. I mean, I just thought, this is the way it is. You just a bunch of folks in the house. It was a lot of characters, a lot of different personalities. I like, because it was a lot of people, everybody had different chores, I mainly was in charge of sweeping the floor, and the kitchen floor was only so big. And so I just, did my chore sweeping the floor. That's when I did a lot of preaching and singing, because I was horrible at sweeping the floor. But the floor was only so big, so you'd have people to share chores with, you had people to play with, we went to church, you had people to laugh with. To me, it was like one big party all the time.
That's amazing. And so you grew up in the church. Your father was a pastor, and as the pastor of a church with a lot of your family in it now, describe to me what it was like growing up as what they call it, a PK.
Well, there was two ways to look at it. I once again, it was normal life for me. I just didn't know anything other than being in the church. However, I did notice that there were a lot of things that my friends were doing that I wasn't doing, Sunday night, Sunday night, I think, think back, I think like the $6 Million Man was coming on. And,
yeah, I remember that.
Disney World. And I would be in church. Tuesday night, I think A-Team was coming on, and I'd be in church. Friday night, I was so glad when DVDs came out. No, VCR. Because
he just told his age. It's all right. Go ahead.
When they came out, because I love soap operas, especially night soap operas. So I would tape Dallas, because we would be in church on Friday night. So I would have to tape Dallas. So being in church a lot, I kind of wanted to know what it was like. We were very, I would say, moderately conservative holiness family. So on the conservative part, didn't do movies. So I wanted to be, what's it like, to go to movies? What's it like not to be at church on Sunday morning and just kind of throwing the football around until the football game came on? What's it like to, go to parties and things? So growing up in church, it made me wonder, what was it like to live,
a life outside the church. It's funny. You just talked about that, Willie.
Yeah, I promise you that was gonna be one of my questions, because I think a lot of times people have this like it's easy because you grew up in church, but really it's like you kind of like, I don't want to say stick out like a sore thumb as a bad thing, but it's kind of like if you grow up in church and school, people know that. Because of the things that you don't do, the way you carry yourself. So I was the same when I was wondering, like, man, I wonder what it's like to, go play football, go to the movies. I thought I was going to go to hell if I went to the movies, because I was in that era to where it just wasn't something that was accepted. So, and it just became normal. I couldn't listen to Kirk Franklin when he first came out.
Oh, wow.
Wow. So was that considered being rebellious if you went to a movie or went to a sports event, or God forbid you went to a school party or something? Was that considered that?
Hey guys, it's Willie from the Black Culture Podcast. I know you're enjoying this dope interview, but before you continue,
make sure to like, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at the Black Culture Podcast.
I would say the sporting events were not a problem. You just didn't go during church time, when a lot of them, that's when most of them happened. But it was not so much. Well, that's why I would say we were moderately conservative, because there were some who were a little bit more conservative, where playing sports. I mean, there were some families where you didn't play sports, you didn't wear shorts. We were not that conservative. We were moderate. Going to sporting events and playing sports was fine. You just didn't do it during church time, which didn't leave a lot of time to do it. But yeah, if you were like going to movies, my sisters did not wear pants at that time. So they did not wear makeup, so and that's where the conservative part was. So you didn't wear makeup, you didn't go to movies, things of that nature. Didn't go to dance parties. We didn't even sleep over a lot of people's houses.
Mm-hmm.
So in a sense, that would have been doing as the world does. And maybe, yes, to a certain extent, rebellious. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so before we jump ahead, I wanna ask you a question, because as the years went on, those standards kind of not like just fell down, but it kind of got kind of, okay, you can't do this. It's okay if the girl is out, if she can wear jeans, or you can go to a movie. It's okay. What era around, like, when did you think that started to that transition started to switch?
Well,
It's a good
there's
question.
two ways to look at it. I think that, for some, it never did switch. It still hasn't. I would say, by the time I started pastoring in 2000, I would say between the some of the churches that I was around in our churches, sort of towards the 90s, I saw a lot of things straight. Late 80s, 90s started, things started changing. And from my perspective, I don't know why things change in others. I can't speculate. But for our situation, I think, like, you know, I would say just kind of practical approach to things. That's why I started developing. Hopefully, I can start in the book, Practical Holiness Theology. Started looking at it from a practical point of view. It's cold outside, and wearing skirts in 0-degree weather, it was cold. That was one of the first things I remember. My I think it was my mother, who had that conversation with me. I believe he said she had that conversation with my sisters. Like, I can't believe, it's cold out there. You all got to cover up your legs. And then, more than practical, some of the activities. Once again, we weren't against going to amusement parks. It was just, when do you do it? We weren't against sporting events, but a lot of those activities, from a practical point of view, just were not expedient for skirts. I mean, bowling, jumping up and down, your skirt goes up and down.
Right, of course.
So, I watched, when I started, in my teens, so that would be what, like I said, mid to late 80s, they started coming out first with gauchos. I don't know if you all remember gauchos. So gauchos were like short pants that comes to a woman's knees, but they're wide enough that they look like skirts, and so they were called gauchos. And then when that came out, I started seeing that some of the ladies being getting that. I think even my sisters got those. So they come to the knees or below the knees, and they look like they're skirts, but they're really, short pants. And that helped a lot of transitioning into, because it just became realistic, practically. It just, for that. And then, with makeup, it just became more and more, generations started popping up. Why is it sinful? Why is wearing pants sinful? And when the more you ask questions, then the more you try to find your theological response for it. And then when you try to match it up, with scripture, it doesn't really go with that scripture. And so the late 80s, 90s, I just started seeing things begin to kind of change in a lot of the holiness Pentecostal churches. Not all of them. Some of them are still very strict conservative, and I respect them for that. But for a number of them, especially in the culture church.
So I grew up in church, but I grew up in more of a lax environment.
Mhm.
But I never forget, and I've got aunts in the church. My mom is in church. I remember last year I threw a party for my mother. Not a party. It was it was a birthday dinner, and I had it at Nighttown, and
Okay.
I invited my aunt, and she said, I mean, when I invited her and she found out it was a jazz club, she went off on me, right? And so
Right.
I'm like, why is she so upset about jazz music? Like, it's gonna be nice. It's just, no words really. It's just music. And one of my friends told me, he said, "How old is your aunt?" And I told him, he said, "That's why." Said she grew up in an era where jazz music was
Correct.
considered the way rap music is now.
Correct.
So what kind of music were you allowed to listen to and not listen to back then?
And once again, I would have to, that's where I say we're a little bit more moderate conservative, because while we did not, there was certain type of secular music we listened to. My mother was a she's a trained classical pianist. So classical music was always part of our life. So instrumental music was part of our life. There were certain old love songs that I knew that if I sang it around the house wouldn't be a problem. Like, oh, promise me that one day you and I, something like that. Or Mona Lisa, men have named thee, that old Nat King Cole.
Pastor, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I don't mean to cut you off because like I'm noticing something. Did other church or church members look at your mom and dad different because they were more modern?
I, I, I would say understand that I considered them um, uh, to be modern, but within the Kojic realm, I consider us moderate conservative.
Okay.
There were more liberal Kojic churches that were liberal before us, so a lot of churches didn't always look at us as more modern, but some did because um, for instance, my mother, because she played only by music and did not play by ear, the gospel music that she played, it would have to be sheet music. Well, our music department, and this is even before my time, was ahead of some music departments because Andre Crouch came out with a more gospel contemporary sound, but he put his music on sheet music. So we were considered to be a little bit more modern than some churches because we would have the piano, we would have the bass and drums, and my mother could do the whole because it was sheet music. So in that aspect, people saw us modern, but our lifestyle, I can't say that people looked at our parents different because we were quote unquote modern. It was moderate conservative. Okay. So for some, we were still considered to be pretty strict.
I just learned something new too. I did not know Mother Parker played piano.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Oh yeah, that's why all of us are into music because growing up, you played an instrument. Everybody played an instrument. Right now, she's teaching theory to my nieces and nephews. So my nieces and nephews that are around there, she's teaching them music. And certainly when I was just talking with my brother John that it was just a lot we were planning on doing before the pandemic, and we wanted to for senior society, her singing and playing. But yeah, she still plays. She's a wonderful, matter of fact, she grew up in Youngstown, Ohio. Now she came from a little bit, it was still kind of a strict background but more liberal. She grew up in Baptist church, but she played for different churches classical. She was a higher classical musician.
So let me ask you this: with all of that said, especially about the church, and you grew up in, I would say a Black church. What would you say some of the biggest misconceptions about the Black church is from someone who's outside looking in?
Well, a number of things from that misconceptions, and I didn't realize how deep these were until I started Bible training with John Carroll. There's a misconception that Black church is ignorant. is not educated.
Mm.
During the time that my father was one of the youngest gentlemen to be ordained in the Church of God in Christ, which is the largest Pentecostal sect at 19, but he was also one of the first to be, get his degree in religious education. And so he was a degree preacher. So there was a misconception that, you really don't have to get any training, any Bible training. You just go preach. Another, so the ignorant part really bothered me. Another part, we were Pentecostal Black church. So another part was that we were just in hysteria. People never quite understood Pentecostalism, the music, the dancing, the speaking in tongues and things of that nature. I found those to be misconceptions. And other misconceptions out there, money hungry, the preacher wants the money, the preacher wants the women, things of that nature.
So that he can drive the Cadillac and the sports car.
He can drive this Cadillac, have his way with the women, and also a certain form. There were certain people that we were cultish. That certain Black churches, it's just like a cult. They're there all the time, all day, and those sorts of things became real to me when as I grew older. Like, wow, these things are not the truth for every church.
Now, did you see any of that? Like, I know that is a misconception. Did you see any churches where there were pastors and, you knew that they weren't treating their folks right? They were all about the money or all about women. Did you see any of that as you grew up in the church?
Let me take away the term misconception and put in place broad labeling. Because yes, I've seen it, and I'm sure every sect, every faith community would say they've seen that, or they know of it or experienced it on all spectrums. So yeah, I've witnessed, some of those things, and so I want to take it that is the reality of certain places, and that's why I'm staying away from the term misconception, but broad labeling, because maybe it's happened or witnessed in a few, then you label everybody.
Okay. All right, Pastor, you mentioned John Carroll, and in the intro, we also said that you're an attorney. So explain to us, when did you know that was the career path, that like being into law and into that career path? When did you know that's what you wanted to do?
Interesting, interesting question. I'm going to start trying to do this. My wife laughs at me. She says, you never go straight to an answer. So I'm gonna give you an answer first and the story later.
Okay.
I did not know until my senior year in undergrad. So that's the short answer. And then a little background, sixth grade, when I did the sort of like the graduation or the promotion speech for my sixth grade class. And I remember a teacher, she wasn't my teacher, but she was another teacher, Ms. Rush. And she said to my mother, he's going to be an attorney. And
wow.
that was in sixth grade. And I said, bishop, maybe. I don't know about that. I think I'll be bishop. And quite understand, I grew up, and I hate wanting to say era, because I'm only 48. It sounds like I'm 77 when I say era. But I grew up in a time where in my church, it was not believed that you could be saved and be an attorney. So there was no push for anyone to become an attorney. That was not a belief my parents held, but that was a belief.
Wow.
That was held in the church. And believe you me, I still get questions today from people that say, how was there no conflict with you being a pastor and attorney? That's a different subject. But anyway, I even had my step grandmother asked me, can an attorney be saved? So I wasn't trying to be an attorney. She said that in 6th grade, but it wasn't until John Carroll, I was on the Rapid, the Blue Line, I believe that is, the Van Aken line.
That's
And I
definitely
was
blue line.
heading downtown. And then Fred Nance, who was my mentor at the time, one of the most successful African-American attorneys, not just in Cleveland, but in the country. He was a finalist to become NFL commissioner. He's one of the attorneys over the LeBron Foundation. He's just very, very influential and powerful in the country. And he's my mentor, still is my mentor. And he was getting off the Rapid. And I'll never forget, I got off the Rapid. I ran to him because I had not figured out what I was going to do after undergrad. And I said to these words, I want to be just like you. And he says, what does that mean? I said, I want to be an attorney like you. And he was like, Anthony, it's October. It's your, your senior year in school. Have you applied to law school? And I said, no. And he said, get somewhere and do applications. So it was a last minute thing.
That's an interesting
Hold on, real
story.
quick, just for me, what high school did you go to?
JFK, Jonathan.
Yes, sir.
Hey, I'm an ego. I'm an ego.
Y'all silly. So
well, that's right. You went to Heights. That's right.
Yes, sir. I'm a Tiger, so you keep that eagle up in the air and don't come down here with the Tigers, man.
You said keep the eagle up in the air?
Yes, sir. So, real quick question. So you said you wanted to be just like this guy, which I'm assuming that he was probably one of your motivations to becoming an attorney. Let's talk about briefly the contrast between between working in clergy and working in law, because that's really not common to start with. Most individuals who become pastors, they don't come from that type of background. One requires faith, the other one requires law. So let's talk about that contrast a little bit. Basically, you're engaged in two professions that require a great deal, but are kind of on both opposite ends of the spectrum.
Well, actually, they are not, and surprisingly, they're not. Couple of things. First of all, I'm a part of a number of groups, and even in Cleveland, because you're right, it is not the majority, but the number of pastors who are attorneys in the Cleveland area.
Really?
Realize. Oh yeah. And I'm part of a national organization now of people of faith and the attorneys and the evangelists, the missionaries, the pastors who are attorneys. Kind of blew my mind, because you first have to understand the basis of law comes from the Old Testament. You want to define the difference between manslaughter, murder in the Old Testament. How are civil laws, how to personal injury, how do we decide to give a person money for injury to property rather than taking their life? Old Testament. How do we decide if you give me something of your possession and I lose it while it's in my possession, I have to make you whole? Old Testament. So the basis of our laws comes straight from the Bible, which is one thing. In school, I was able to take a course that developed with religion in the law. And so once it became even more and more clearer, once I became an attorney and started practicing, because I started practicing in 1997. All right. So in 1997, I just became an associate pastor. And at that time, well, no, I was just an elder. At that time, it was a church that my brother was pastor. He started a church, Then he merged with a congregation because my father used to pastor two churches. He pastored a church, and then he assumed the pastor of my grandfather's church. And so the first church he pastored, that church, my brother merged his church with that church. And there were some issues and some legal issues that went on, some difficult legal issues. And I had just passed the bar, became an attorney, and I had to lead the church through these legal issues. So from the onset, the marriage of the church and the law has been there with their forgiven, because one of the first big cases I had to deal with were churches. I worked for a very renowned firm, an attorney, George Forbes. It was Forbes, Fields and Associates, and he was the managing partner and the founder. And he was always called to churches to speak, and I would help write his sermons. He was the attorney for so many churches. And at that time, it seemed like churches were kicking pastors out left and right. And we would have to be there. It would be like, civil war in churches. Churches with folks showing up with guns, telling the pastor he can't come in. So from the get-go, I got involved in having to work in church law. So for me, there was no two different worlds. The problem was they were two very time-consuming professions, which means hard to balance time. And then for me, for ethics, because the biggest problem people had for me is, well, don't lawyers have to lie and steal? There's this conception that they lie. Well, if it's like any profession. If you come to a profession with certain integrity and ethics, there's only certain things you're going to do, certain jobs you're going to take, certain cases you're going to take. So it just wasn't two different realms for me.
So operating as an attorney and as a pastor, is there ever a struggle? So you're a magistrate, which is a person most people don't actually want to see. So do you ever find that there is a struggle, or, I'll ask it in a two-part question. Do you ever find that there is a struggle, or having the background of both gives you edge as far as benefit to see things differently than someone that doesn't have that type of background?
That is a very good question. Matter of fact, all you all's questions, you all do a very good job interviewing. Let me say that. First of all, these are very good questions. A funny thing, one of the hardest things, when I sit there as a magistrate, attorney, or personal bailiff, when I'm in my role, I'm always a pastor. But I have to know at that certain time that I'm on the clock as what I'm being paid to do as my profession, the secular profession, but the pastor is still in me. Now, the funny part, I'm gonna give you 3 answers to the question. The funny part is that so many saints are in the legal system. So, I'm sitting there getting ready to run court as a magistrate, and somebody in the audience that's about to come before me is a saint. Hey, Pastor Parker. See, people can't distinguish the type. And I'm like, I'll never forget, I went to a church and I preached at a church, and the man was shouting and speaking and falling out. He was catching the spirit, and he said, I knew you were the attorney for me because the way you preach. Well, his case didn't go well. And he used us, but we lost because his case was horrible. So then he started, wondering about my faith. Then I had this one client, she got hit. It was soft tissue. She got hit, and she wanted a $100,000 settlement. And because I'm a pastor, she thought I should get it and told me I had a lack of faith. It had nothing to do with my faith. It had to do with the fact that her case wasn't worth that.
He told you your prayer wasn't strong enough.
Yes. But the one thing though, that two of my, I have a couple of ministers in my life, and one of the criticisms that they had, constructive criticism they have for me, is that Anthony, if you do want to, go further, run for office or something, the pastor in you sometimes is too nice, and the other thing is that, you want to save everybody. And when you're doing your profession, you have to realize I've got to, work within my guidelines here. And it's not always saving soul time. Sometimes it's executing judgment, which in a sense is saving soul if people don't get judgment.
Pastor Anthony T. Parker is our guest on the Black Culture Podcast. Church and community service, Pastor. It's a two-part question I have for you. The first one is, it's actually three questions. First question is, what made you decide to pastor? Then the second question is, explain to us what do you consider church and community service? And my third question is, why now more than ever, even with the global pandemic? Because I feel like right now more than ever, church and community service is very important.
Let me go back to your first point. Why did I decide back? I always say I did. I always say that was God decided that I was going to pastor, God and my brother, and I didn't have any say so in it. Now I told you, as a boy, I always liked to preach. I've always thought I'd be a preacher, a little preaching bishop somewhere. So it was always in my heart to preach and to one day pastor. But the fact that I started at March 2000 was totally unexpected, because as I said, in 1997, I'm becoming an attorney. I'm helping my brother go through a transition, through a merger that things kind of went south on. And because we had to go through it, it was a full-blown lawsuit. That I had to lead a church through a whole lawsuit. And then at the conclusion of that lawsuit, was the church that we are was birthed out of that. It was birthed out of that. And so that's around, that's going to be around 1998, 99. It's birthed out. So it's this new religious organization, this church. And then in 2000, at the same time, my brother is pastoring in Columbus. So he's literally on a Sunday morning in Columbus preaching, then driving to Cleveland to preach and pastor. And he says to me, I want to make you co-pastor. And then he says, I can't do this. You have to take the church. So
let's talk about that. You said he would be in Columbus Sunday morning, preach, hop in his car, drive 2.5 hours to Cleveland, and then preach again, and have to drive back to Columbus.
He was driving back and forth. And then coming back to Cleveland to teach Bible study. And he did that for a while, for at least a year or so. And
wow.
And then he saw more in me than I saw myself. I was not ready. I wasn't ready. I wasn't trying to pastor at that point. And Antoinette was not trying to be anybody's first lady at that point.
Is anybody ever really ready to pastor when they're called to be pastor?
I don't know. I think maybe some were more ready than I am. Some people go out, they start it, and they just go for it. But I wasn't trying to, and the people, the majority of the people were not ready for me to pastor. So
wow,
it was rough. I would say that only a handful that are with us now are the ones who stayed. When I became pastor, like a good 60-70% of the congregation up and left.
Wow.
All the preachers, the music department, besides just a couple of people that were my family. I mean, the people who you see as elders now weren't elders then. The only one who was an elder at that point was Elder Pastor Jackson. He was the only one. Nobody else was. And so we had to start from scratch, and God built from there. So it was one of the roughest times in my life.
You know what? Before you answer the other two questions, I do want to touch on that point, because from the outside looking in, very few people actually know the struggles of starting a church or taking over a church as a pastor. And I would ask you this: what would be some short advice that you would give to someone looking to pastor, looking to start a church? Some of those struggles that you went through early on.
The first struggle, is your relationship with God. Your relationship with God is pretty much going to determine how things go. And I was kind of overwhelmed. I had just gotten married. I was not as mature in the faith that I could have been. Not that we all get to a certain level of maturity. We always are growing. I could have been further along in my growth. You've got to cry out to God and talk to God, because there are crucial decisions that you have to make, and you need God speaking to you. The other thing is you've got to get you an attorney. You've got to get you an accountant. Okay, those are two important things, because it is God's church and it's a religious organization, but it's a business, and you've got to start. I mean, so sometimes church is the only people, like, you're an entrepreneur, Brother Alex Price, and Brother Willie, on your way. Nobody thinks of, okay, let me just, well, I'm sure some people do it and they shouldn't, but nobody just sets up a company and don't get no legal advice, no
Right.
accounting, nothing. We're just gonna run this company.
Right.
Well, that's how sometimes people do churches. Like, no, you need an accountant, you need an attorney. You should have if you can't put any other ministry together, you should have at least 2 to 3 pastors who can be there to advise you, people you can look up to and talk to. Those are basic things. Your prayer life, relationship with God, get an attorney and accountant, and getting some people to speak into your life so that you can make decisions. And one of the crucial other things is whatever's going on in your personal life. I had just gotten married. It's taken some years, for my wife to train me in how to be a good husband. She's a good trainer. But come on, your first year of marriage, and this may
I'm
not
still
be
in
true for a lot of
training.
people. You're a knucklehead. So
I'm sorry, Willie, say that one more time so everybody can hear.
I said I'm still in training, so
you're
I
still
know
in
what you're talking
training.
about.
Your spiritual life, and then get your relationship life. If you're single, calm that thing down. What are you doing? If you're married, get that family life together, because a messed up family life plus the messed up spiritual life plus no business sense to it is going to make the ministry start off in disaster.
Wow. Wow, that's great advice. That's great advice. So I want to get back to Willie's question, and he was asking about the importance of church and community service.
Before you say that, though, because I know you're not going to do it, so I'm going to do it for you. Pastor Parker is one of, for me, one of the first churches I've been to where he actually, when you talk about churches getting out there in the community, he actually does it. So he's not someone that's just on here talking about it. He's actually doing it. So I wanted to make sure I give you your flowers and pat you on the back, because I know you're not going to pat yourself on the back.
No.
No. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. To me, church is community service. They have to be one and the same in sense. This is that Jesus was all about what can I do for the community, and so that when he got around the disciples, and to me it was empowerment. to go. I mean, there was a couple of times where he says, I'm gonna send you out. I'm gonna send you out. He put the Holy Spirit on them and gave them. It's like we come together in our faith communities for our worship services and our Bible training for what? To go out then and do the work of Christ. So the times that we're together and worshiping and in our Bible study, is to empower us to, now when you leave this, how can you impact the community? And the philosophy that I go for is, we're getting ready to go into phase 3 of when it comes to property, maybe acquiring property, or whatever we're going to do for our next level when it comes to property. But the philosophy I go through is this: give God a reason to expand your territory. That's the way he works with me. He's just not going to give us a new building because so that we can keep up with other churches or a place to look nice. There's a reason. If you don't have a community service reason for me to expand your territory, then you need no expansion.
Wow. I want to segue real quick to you talked about some of the difficulties.
Hold for one more second.
Okay.
Okay. My wife has granted me some extra time, so go ahead.
Oh, okay. Okay. Awesome. Nice.
Thank you, First Lady.
So you talked about some of the struggles at the beginning. One of the things I want to ask you about is one of the most difficult times of your life. I never forget, I got a call from a guy that you may know. His name is John Parker. And this was maybe 3 years ago. I want to say I was on my way home, and he shot me a text about the passing of your father.
Yes.
And I personally haven't lost a parent. It's crazy because within these past, I would say 5 years, I've had lots of friends who've lost mothers, fathers, and whatnot. Being in the role that you were in and as close as you were to him, how were you able to process that, and how were you able to kind of I don't know if you would ever move past it, but sort of be the rock and the strength for the rest of your family, as well as dealing with your own grief?
There's a couple of things. Death has just being around funerals, funeral homes, things of that nature was always difficult for me. I would say for a good portion of my life, until I'm trying to see when it started to change, maybe in my mid-30s. My father started me off presiding funerals when I was 13 years old. He kept me close to him. And because of that, the whole issue of death and things, he really got me into that so I could have 20 or so years to kind of work and process through it. So it got to a point where and my wife attests. I mean, it's not all the time, but sometimes I can when a situation hits, I can kind of know, I kind of have an idea which way it's going, if that makes sense. God will give me a hint for certain, not all situations, but a lot of situations. So my father had some, health battles, and we were not looking for him to die in October of 2018. However, a few months before, I was on the highway, and God told me he was about to die. And I did not share it with my family. It was not the appropriate time, but I shared it at the time of his death, because what God did, I was driving down 480, and he told me, your father's going to die. And he told me what church the funeral would be at. And he told me to call the pastor. And I called the pastor. It was Bishop. And I said, I said, if something happens to my father, I need to have the funeral there. And I didn't tell anybody that I had already made the plans for my dad's funeral. But I told my wife. And when my dad passed, the family said where it's going to be at. That's when I told them that I had already made the plans. And I think that God did that because he knew I had to pastor and that I couldn't fall apart. I wanted to dress the body. And because I said I would, then my brothers, John and Martin, came with me. And I dressed his body in my clergy. And God let me know he was going to die so that I could have that experience, dress him, be there at the casket to close it. Those are tough things to do, but he knew I would have to pastor. And so what happened is I was able to, I wrote my dad's obituary. I would say 4 years before he died. I'm getting ready to lead the church this year through a series called Prepare for the Future. And it's hard to do, but I wrote his obituary 4 years before he passed. I just interviewed him. And it was for his 80th birthday. And I had this great biography of him. So that when he passed, all I had to do was pull up the biography, and I had put it into the hands of Pastor Jackson, and he also had to tweak it. We had the church where he was going to go. I knew a funeral home because I believe that church pastors should have a series. You should have professionals. A pastor doesn't know everything. So you should have professionals in your life do. And so I have relationships with funeral homes, relationships with doctors. So while my dad was laying in the hospital and he's giving his last breath, I was able to call the owner of a funeral home. He was in Florida, but I was making the decision because, the quicker you can get the remains, the better it will look during the time of the funeral. And I was able to cut through red tape. His body was taken from the hospital not more than 2 hours from dying. I knew exactly where he would go. I knew what kind of the service. And so then it made it easier for my family and for my older brother who did the eulogy. It made it easier for everything else to flow. And so the only reason I was able to still pastor is because God let me know ahead of time what was about to happen.
Wow, that's incredible.
I always wondered that because I watched Pastor go through that, and I always ask my wife, like, man, how is Pastor? He's so strong. Like, so this is my first time hearing that. Like, wow.
That's incredible.
It was all God.
I remember going to the funeral. And I at the time I didn't actually know you, but I knew Johnny, and I said, bro, anything you need. And I never actually got a chance to meet your dad either. But I remember walking into the church and seeing the amount of people that were there. He had Howard doing the sound, and it sounded like a live recording. And so I said to myself, I immediately knew this man was very, very well.
It felt like
loved.
a live recording.
Yeah, it was, and it was, I've been to funerals where there may be 10, 20 people that show up.
That was
And then
homegoing.
I've also been to homegoing where there was standing room only. So I can just attest to the fact from afar, since I've actually never had the chance to meet him, John being one of my best friends, and now knowing you, that your dad was truly a great, great man. And so I've always wanted to know that. I want to segue into this too. There's another part of you being a pastor that requires you to counsel couples.
Mm-hmm.
And in today's climate where relationships and marriage have so many meanings to so many different people, sort of ambiguous in a sense, what are some of the things that you have to tell couples as you counsel them? What's some of the principles that you share with them in order for them to have any measure of success?
Well, the first thing I have to tell them is that I start off as a knucklehead. I think that one of the keys to ministry is transparency. You don't have to tell everything that you've done, but you've got to let people, they've got to be able to understand that you understand what struggle is and what it means to get married. And I do not like to do any type of sessions without my wife there, because then she can attest to the fact that, that I tell them, number one, it's going to be a struggle. You're going to have some struggles. Number two, I make them look at it as a practical point of view. Two different people raised from two different backgrounds. Most times they come from two different parts of the city or country. And now you're going to live under one roof and try to be one life. You're going to have some crazy moments. I mean, think about it. Some of us can't stand, to be in the same house with our siblings or parents or grandparents, let alone you keep waking up and it's the same person there. You like it cold, they like it hot. You like Rice Krispies, they like corn flakes. And I love it because my brother said that's the beauty of relationship. My oldest brother, when he was in the classes that my wife and I ran, he said, "Who wants to marry their clone or twin? That's no fun. If you're both the same." That's one principle we tell them: if you're both the same, one of you is not needed. So enjoy each other's, embrace differences. But one of the key principles that I have, because you're right, Brother Alex, first of all, I get away from any preconceived notions. You gotta, pastors gotta get out their mind that these are two people who done kept themselves pure and holy for this marriage. I get people have different stories, but one thing I make them decide is, you think about it. What type of marriage do you want to be? Do you want to be a God-based, God-fearing marriage, or do you just want to be a marriage that acknowledges that there is a God? I want them to decide, because
that's interesting.
I mean, the thing about it, we have to be realistic. There are married couples out there who don't profess God, Christianity, go to church, have been married for 60 years. Then there's some couples out there that, speak in tongues more than they speak in English and couldn't make it past 2 months. So I tell people that, what is the plan that you want? Because don't be, and I know when people hear this, oh man, how could you make people, because I don't want people to pretend. Like, if you're really not into God and you just want me to do sessions with you and marry you, that's fine, but don't play with it. You all decide, are we going to be going to church or not? Are we going to be loving to God or not? It's on you. It's your choice. I'm here to give you spiritual advice. And that's one of the biggest things that I try to get couples, and they kind of look at me surprised. Well, of course we love God. We go to church. No. Think about it. Because one of you may be serious about God and the other is not. And then all of a sudden, after the honeymoon, okay, it's time to go to church. But I ain't going to church. It's time to go to Bible study. I ain't going to Bible study. We got to give tithes. You better not give that much money to the church. That's why I tell people, let's just figure out which way you want to go.
Because Cat Pastor has canceled my wife and I in the past, and he still does. So, but it was so different getting counseling from him because he's a realist. Like, you can't save everybody. And I've been in counseling sessions where they literally, I can save anybody. So it was crazy. And I don't know if Pastor caught my face when I think he had asked, one of the questions was, do you guys want to still be together? I had never been asked that before. And I was shocked because I'm like, the pastor asking that, but it just showed me like, no, he's a realist. He's real. He's not just, because at that time he's your pastor, but at the same time, you have to take out of it. This is now not only is he your pastor, but this is your counselor too. So he's doing what he's supposed to do. And I have a question I wanted to ask you too. If it is more difficult, is it more difficult counseling church couples or non-church couples? If it is a difference.
Ooh.
That's a great question.
What's a good question. I mean, I each can have its difficulties. It can be difficult doing church couples if they're going to if they think they have to give you the answers that they think you want to hear because they're church couples. I don't want the pastor to think bad of me, and it's so hard to get away from that.
And that is something people think because and this is where, because I struggled that, but I think because of the relationship me and you have grown and gained, it's like I can think outside of that now. Because people all the time say, I'm not going to judge you, but as a man, you still thinking this is another man. I don't want him to know this, that, and the third. But once you get past that and it's like you build that relationship, it becomes more easier. So that's why I really wanted you to like explain that.
Because, like when we do it, and I call it in Ohio, this is important. Every state's different, but in Ohio, they allow for you to do faith-based counseling. And because we're not certified counselors, it's faith-based counseling. But sometimes when I get those couples that not members of the church, not members of any of the church, it's a little bit easier to get through the truth, especially premarital. Yeah. But church people, sometimes I want to tell people, first of all, there's nothing you can say to disappoint me. Now, maybe what you say is going to disappoint your spouse, but nothing you're going to say is disappoint me because we're all human. Save you murdered somebody. Now, if you're about to confess that, please hold that up. I don't want to talk about that. But, that's the challenging point. The other challenging part is, and I'll let you get the next question. I try not to be too long with my answers, but is when one person is saved and the other person isn't, and the person who is saved is say, oh, you got to meet this Pastor Parker. We need to go to counseling with him. And the unsaved person, I'm already behind because the unsaved person comes in like, okay, who's this person you like so much? And he's probably already on your side. And that it makes it a little difficult for me to get to the unsaved person and let them know I'm not already taking sides and I'm not holding it against you because you're not professing to be part of the faith.
So I feel like, first of all, we're going to have to do a relationship episode and we got to have Anthony Parker back on. But I do have this question. Has there ever been a time where you just had to flat out tell somebody or a couple it's a good idea for you two not to get married?
Oh, twice.
You had to do it. Okay. Do tell.
Twice. I had two couples that I told don't get married. And I was I actually flat out said, because when me and my wife do the counseling, we tell them, if during this counseling, we determine that based upon our conversations and your answers that you should not get married, we're going to tell you. And I told one of the first couples, I said, don't get married. But if you decide to, I'll still marry you. They went and got married within 6 months, 7, 8 months through. The next couple told them don't get married. It didn't last within 1 to 2 years because we are straightforward. If we don't think that you should do it, we tell you.
So how does that work? Yeah. So how does that work? If you think someone shouldn't get married and you still decide to marry them, have you ever refused to marry someone because?
I've done everything from living room, pajama weddings to spare the moment weddings. And I may revisit I may revisit who I make myself accessible to marry in the future, but I've had a broad stance, and so once again, that's when I go from the term, I don't want to say strict conservative, a little bit moderate conservative, because I mean there would in my background, I would say people who are part of the Church of God in Christ Reformation. First of all, if you weren't believers, there's preachers who won't marry you. If they think that one is a believer and one is not a believer, they won't marry you. I've seen people not marry people who were once married before. I'm pretty broad. And my reason for that, I've never refused to marry. The only time I didn't marry somebody called, didn't even know them, and they were supposed to have a marriage, and they were like, we got $150, will you come marry us? I don't do stuff that. But somebody's got to marry them. And I've had, I've taken criticism for some of the marriages I perform. I've taken criticism. But I said, somebody's got to marry them. I'd rather them allow me to marry them, and I am praying over them that they beat every obstacle, than them going to the justice of the peace or going to some preacher that's just going to marry them and not pray. Every couple that I've married, I have prayed over, whether I've known them a little bit or a long time. And I believe in this, and this is why I may be being a little bit, careful with the marriages that I do perform, because I believe this: if I marry you, I'm in a relationship with you, and I have the pandemic's just done so much, but there's a ministry of our church called I Still Do, and I'm going to put the couples on a Zoom call pretty soon. Once I marry you, I make myself accessible to you for the rest of your marriage, because I believe it's a relationship.
Whoa, say that one more time. Say that again.
Once I perform the ceremony, I make myself accessible for the rest of your relationship, because I believe that that I take it serious to perform. If I'm the one who performed it, I believe now that I am under a spiritual duty to help you stay together. And that's what the I Still Do ministry. I try to reach out to every couple that I've ever performed a marriage to let them know they're part of this group called I Still Do. And that's why I don't take it lightly. You just shouldn't show up and marry. You are saying, my wife and I are saying we're part of this covenant relationship, and I take it serious.
Hey, really quick, Alex, before you take over and do what you do. Hey, Pastor, if you can tell us what was the craziest thing you've been a part of or seen at a wedding that you've had to marry?
Oh my goodness!
And I know you got us.
Oh.
I feel like that may be its own episode.
I remember in the summer we had a walk and you was telling me something and I can't remember what it was, but I remember we was laughing about it.
You may have to jog my memory. I've had so many situations. I'm gonna start letting it.
Anything. It don't matter.
I've had. Well, it sort of depends. When you say you want Anthony, I like that T, Parker, to perform the ceremony or the renewal, and I've had some touching ones. As a side note, one of the more touching ceremonies that I've done are when divorced people remarry and they come back to me. Those are beautiful stories. But that this is a preacher who does not drink, who does not like the club atmosphere. So they'll do the ceremonies in a way so that I've done ceremonies, and a certain time the married couple have come and excused me and my wife, and they said it's a good time for you to leave now, Reverend, because we about to get wild. and they'll have it, so they'll excuse me. I've done some ceremonies where there was this one particular one, there was alcohol involved, and I don't know all the names for alcohol. So I was doing a ceremony, and before the ceremony, they were giving out some refreshments, and I was in line. And so they had to come and say, Reverend, you're in the wrong line. I didn't know, it looked like fruit drinks to me.
Your line is over there.
I thought it was fruit punch. And they had to say, Reverend, you're in the wrong line. Those are all funny to me. I've done weddings where everybody was drunk, and just barely standing out.
Before the wedding?
Uh-huh.
During the wedding, like before the reception, it was drunk?
Oh, yes.
Oh, my God.
Everybody was tipsy.
It's called the bachelor party, bro. Bachelor, bachelorette.
But they stood up long enough for me to get. I've been in one wedding where, and then I'll let this the last one. I mean, where it was an outside wedding, and it went and stopped raining, and so they were inside, but I knew the bride wanted it to be an outside wedding. And so literally, I don't know. I am not one of those people who think I just got all this power with God. I would say this was like totally coincidental. But I went to the door and I said, God, if you give me 20 minutes, I will get this girl married. Just please give me 20 minutes. Within 10 minutes, it stopped. I ran outside. They rushed the party through. We did the wedding. And within 20 minutes, the rain started again.
Wow.
Totally, I say coincidental.
Wow. So we're almost out of time, but and we're definitely going to do a part 2 because this is just too good. Part 2, yes. I definitely want to talk about pastoring during the pandemic. That's something that I want to talk about. But we're all sports guys, and I feel like we should end on this note. And Willie, I want you to get in on this too. So I predicted Ohio State will beat Clemson. But man, COVID has not been kind to any of our teams. From the Browns.
One quick, my pastor, my resident pastor. Yes. Okay. Yes. Oh. Vacation with the wife. She just gave me good news. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
That's gonna be good on the record. I like that.
Yeah, that's gonna be great on the record. So I just want to know how much have you prayed? How much have you fasted so that the Browns can win Sunday and the Buckeyes can win on Monday? And if you haven't, what is your prediction with everything that's been going on?
First of all, my dad loves sports. Once again, why I call him a moderate conservative, because a lot of his upbringing of the people before him wouldn't have been into sports. But he let me know that it was pretty okay to pray about sports. So I have no problem praying about sports.
Thank you so much, because I had no idea how that worked. Thank you.
Because
my God.
The thing about it is, it's just like, I think of them, what if they were members of my church? I'm praying for their health and for them to do well. Now, my prayers get a little funny to my wife, because I prayed the same prayer that I prayed when LeBron did the block. It was either right before the block or right after. I fell to my knees and I said, Lord, please, we never win anything. And my wife still laughs at me today, because I had tears in my eyes as I fell to my knees saying, please, Lord. Mm-hmm. So
which I gotta chime in, because you said your dad loves sports. That was on Father's Day.
Yes, correct.
We won that game on Father's
Day. I'll never forget that, Father's Day. So for the Brown-Steeler game, I prayed that prayer, Father, seriously, we haven't been to the Super Bowl to the playoffs. Lord help, let us get to the Super Bowl. Playoffs since 2002, I believe it is. Let us get there. Ohio State is a little different for me for the Browns. And that's why I've asked the Lord to increase my faith. I believe that they are a Big Ten powerhouse, but for so many years under, even with Tressel, he won a championship, but before that, it was like we never could keep up with the SEC boys. We weren't that fast enough. That really bothered me. I mean, it messed me up. So I have always gone with the assumption of the fear that when we get to the big dance, we can't do it. You know, I have more faith now. I think this Justin Fields guy is determined to win. But I got to be honest, if we don't take Alabama, I'll just be like, well, they're just, as it's always been. But we beat Alabama 2 years ago, right?
Yep.
When we lost to Clemson. So I want us to win. With the Cleveland Browns, you don't have 3 of your coaches around, 2 more players around. You got 2 other people drag racing. I want Ohio State and the Browns to win. And yes, there's a little bit of doubt in me. I said it.
You want to give your
and
take
I'm praying
first,
about
Alex,
it.
and then
Have
I'll
I
go?
prayed? Yes, I am praying and will pray on Sunday. And we'll do like I did the Cavs. These are important games. So I will not. I did not watch the Cavs championship until the block. I kept it off. I hope and I pray and I check the score because I don't want to provide any negative energy. And so I'm just going to pray, check the score, and then tune in. Yeah.
Go ahead, Willie. Go ahead.
So my quick analysis for this Browns game. Listen, one thing, for some reason, through all of this, I feel like they're going to win. Because one thing I've learned about this team is when you praise them, they lose. But when you count them out, they go win. Nobody thought they was going to beat Tennessee, definitely the way they did. Nobody thought they was going to beat Baltimore. Now they did lose to Baltimore, but the way they played was like, okay. So even if they do lose, I don't think it's going to be the way people think. I think people think we just going to go out there and get rolled on. I don't think so. I honestly believe it's going to be a close loss or we're going to win the game. And as far as Ohio State, Devontae Smith, that's all I got to say. They have him, we don't.
But they do have Devontae Smith. I think he's going to have a good game, but Mr. O and Mr. Wilson are going to have big games. They don't have Justin Wilson. Ohio State will beat Alabama.
That's what I like to hear.
And the Browns will beat the Steelers, despite my doubts. And I'm going to go. I'll end it with this because I definitely want to hear what Alex has to say. It goes to the fact that we have a real coach, and there's one, I don't remember who it was, and they're like, guys, first of all, they said 2 things. Baker helped get the Browns to where they are. And he's growing. He's not a Hall of Famer or anything like that. It's like if you say anything good about him, people want to point out his flaws. Okay, but he has played well enough. If he had not played as well as he did, they are not going to the playoffs.
No.
Because a Super Bowl, a bad quarterback can derail everything. Chubb is a huge reason. So you got Baker and Chubb well. But this one analyst said this. Stefanski is one of the few coaches who seems to master well coaching and calling plays. And he's very calm. He has a calm demeanor and he has a feel. Has he made every perfect call? No, even he's admitted. So obvious times when we're like, why did you make that call? But they're like, with the Steelers, and this is the thing you have to look at. The Steelers need to win this because they're coming to the end of the road.
It's house money for us.
We are on the upcline. They're on the decline. No matter what obstacles, matter of fact, and some people said, well, you barely beat their section. No. Who we played last week are proven veterans They should have beat us. If you're trying to win a Super Bowl teams first and second stringers win games. Okay. We are at a point where they've never been in the playoff atmosphere. So then the coach, it's chess. The Steelers are going to be trying to change in-game planning and decisions. You need your coach there to say, okay, we're going to do this. And all of that now is on who? Pfeiffer, right? Mm-hmm. So the question is, can he do what Stefanski would do? I don't know, but I'm calling them to win because I'm not sold on Pittsburgh as a championship caliber team. That second string should have beat the Browns.
Well, I'll just say this, and I'll keep mine short. Nobody even expected us to go to the playoffs this season. So for me, that's a W right there. Number 2, if we win or if we don't win, and I think we will win, it would represent a hurdle that the Browns are a serious contender. Mm-hmm. As far as the Buckeyes go, we had 2 W's last week with the Browns and the Buckeyes, and I don't see a reason why we can't have a repeat. So that's all I got to say.
The thing about, you got Sermon, who's ready, Justin Fields, who's ready. I see us having a great Sunday and Monday.
Well, all right. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the first episode of our second season of the Black Culture Podcast. If you haven't already, go ahead, smash that like button, leave a comment below, and subscribe to our channel. Follow us on all social channels at theblackculturepodcast.com. Anthony T. Parker, thank you so much for being here. Willie, let's toast it up.
Oh, man, I drank my water, but I got my cup. Yes, sir.
I got mine.
Yes, sir. Pastor got his cup.
What kind of cup I got? Wait. What cup?
I forgot my cup. This is my wife's work cup with pins and our family picture on it.
Now, where's you all's podcast cup?
On the way.
Yes.
On the way.
You will, and you will receive one.
Yeah, you'll receive a cup, shirt, probably a hat. Yeah, you'll be receiving, and we're gonna be having you back on again. This was excellent.
I would like to for the church, Rhema Fellowship Church, to make some type of investment in this podcast and become some type of a sponsor.
Wow.
That's what I would like to see. I see this as an extension. This is the ministry God has birthed through you all. But I'm a businessman. This is good stuff. I'm a businessman. The church got to tag along some way, somehow, only because you guys, I love your life. I love your life. And I would like for the church, you all are men of the church, I would like for us to help sponsor something. So let's talk about that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Pastor. Love you.
Love you,
and thank your wife for allowing you to be on tonight.
I definitely will.
And see you Sunday.
Sunday.
All right. Well, you have a fantastic evening.
Okay.